Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be across the globe and around our planet. Today, I have Mark Lobel with us. He is a principal at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I'm sure most of you are familiar with PwC. And Mark has really over 36 years of business experience, with the first 7 in the entertainment and media industry. He is a leader in the USA cybersecurity risk and regulatory practice, and an internationally recognized cybersecurity IT controls and operations professional with really a lot of deep experience in designing, implementing, benchmarking, and accessing organizational security strategies and technologies, including cybersecurity and identity management solutions. Before his current role, he spent over 4 years as the New York Metro Market cyber leader and many years as PwC's USA and global technology, media, and telecom cyber practice leader. He's also a global PricewaterhouseCoopers subject matter specialist on security benchmarking. In addition, he is truly a sought-after speaker on these and other topics by various media outlets, including CNN, Fox, CNBC, MSNBC, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and others. So, Mark, thank you. Glad to see you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Norm. Great to see you again, and as always.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we used to work together a long time ago, my HBO years.
Back in the day.
That's absolutely correct. So I think, there's really two subjects that you and I have talked about in the past, and that's really security staffing and compliance and the challenges that are being faced today by companies, in part, I think, due to the pandemic and really the work-life changes. And then the other area is, of course, our cyber security budgets really meeting the IT budgets. Are they up to snuff? So I guess, that's what I really like to talk about, and I'll really turn it over to you.
Sure. Kind of starting with your first one, it's cyber staffing and the skills shortage. I think we're seeing this just everywhere. We had a client call and needed some application security support, and they went to 5 different companies because they had people on their staff quit and receive offers at other companies. And I think we were the only one able to reach into our global network and find the skills and capabilities. There is just a real dearth of cyber skills and talent out in the marketplace. And I'll break it into 2 parts for you, Norm.
Sure.
Part number 1, there are just, by certain estimates, millions and millions of unfilled cyber jobs. Part number 2 is, for the jobs that are filled, do the people have the right skills and capabilities, and are they able to keep up at the pace of change that's currently happening? There are some very good certifications out there, but I would say, cybersecurity in general has certifications at certain levels, but when you compare it to the medical profession, it's just different. Now, there are some things that we've leveraged from that type of certification that for medical professionals, but they'll have years of training and then ongoing certification testing and regular CPEs. We have that, but I don't know that it's as detailed and different. And I think the big difference, if cybersecurity professionals make a mistake, they don't have the same ramifications, and for better or worse, don't need the same insurance coverage, the malpractice insurance that
Absolutely.
a medical professional has. So I'm not hoping for medical insurance, but saying when we reach that level, and we're seeing example after example where cybersecurity is becoming life or death.
Yeah.
So from
absolutely.
those 2 perspectives, I think that's one of the first things that keeps me up at night is the lack of skills and the total quality and keeping up that skill base.
Right. And, when we talk about certifications, one of my issues is, I'll look at some people and I'll see alphabet soup after their name. And, truly, I don't really believe that you can keep up, if you're a CDP SE, if you're a CISA, if you're a CISSP, if you can really maintain the efficacy for all of those certs. To me, it makes a lot better sense if you're a CISSP to really stay focused in that environment, or a CISA, because I think there's some commonality between the two. But I think, too, that we really need to get more focused and stay within those parameters so we become truly experts. What are your thoughts on that?
Broadly, I agree with you, but it also depends on the individual and on their particular
Skill set.
circumstances and skill set. For some folks who are moving up the ladder to start with and focusing on a specific technical area, absolutely, you want to build that capability. You want to be able to go deep in that capability. But then as you're moving up your career path, you want to add different levels and different certifications. And to your point, you may let some of the technical ones fall off, but some of the more management focused ones, like a broader CISSP or a CISM or something like that, add to it as you move to managing people and getting management training, or it's not a certification, but getting a master's degree or getting an MBA and learning how the organization works and moving into those leadership and CISO roles. Right. So I think it's going to change over time.
Gotcha. And clearly your MBA, I believe, is from Boston University, correct?
That's correct. I'm CISSP, CISM, CISA, CRISC, QSA, PCIP, and an MBA from Boston University. And I don't think I may have forgotten one.
Yeah, well, you're also PCI certified as well, I believe.
Yep.
Is that mentioned in there?
QSA and the PCIP.
QSA, right, there we go. Yeah, PCI. Good area. Good. I like to see some questions from our audience. We haven't had any. I guess Ernesto said, a jack of all trades is a master of none. I guess I would agree with that. But to your point, maybe as you do move up the food chain and you move into management, some of those more of those certs are not necessary, where you do need to think more at a higher level of management. Because clearly, I think as you move up into management, senior management, managing director, etc., I would think that you tend to lose some of those skills. What are your thoughts? You can't be a jack of all trades, but what are your thoughts, Mark?
I agree with you, Norman. I agree with Ernesto. The question is, what are the right skills for any particular level? So let's just take an example of identity management. If you're on the ground, either installing or managing and maintaining a solution, you've got to be very deep in whatever that specific product is, as well as understand the overall identity framework and the full life cycle of onboarding, management, and offboarding of user identities. As you move up and oversee a group, yes, you're going to lose some of the detailed skills in the product, but you'll understand the conceptual framework and be able to manage it. But you also will then have to manage budget, manage a team, help them grow their careers. And yeah, at some point as you move up, especially if it's a large organization and a large group, you will have to lose some of the technical detail and rely on your technical team, who will be the master of their specific trade. So, but the point then is, if you're managing a group of 10 or 15 or 20 people, or 40 or 70, yeah, your new skill set in that particular capability is going to be having the not only the IQ to understand and get the concept, but the EQ to manage a group, be able to understand and have empathy for the team and some of the challenges, and then also empathy for folks above you. And then the third category there is the ability to learn quickly and understand what you need to understand. So IQ, EQ, LQ, intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, and learning quotient, I think, are three keys for leadership these days.
Right. And how are you finding that? When I looked on LinkedIn, I see a lot of openings within your own firm, looking for really experienced people. How is that going? What are your frustrations? I think I know what your frustrations are, but you may want to share with the audience.
These are, if you will, first world problems. The clients are coming to us, and honestly coming to consulting organizations, looking to help solve complex business challenges. And that kind of leads to one of the other themes I wanted to, that keeps me up at night, which is the concept of complexity.
Yes.
How can you stay on top of a large, complex environment and make sure or have visibility to understand if everything is patched and managed and secure? The more complexity, the more challenges that are out there. And one of the things I've done a lot of recently is looking and doing tools rationalization. Some research I've seen said there's the average organization has over 50 cyber tools.
I believe it.
And I've worked with some who have a lot more than that and spend millions and millions. And when you look at the capabilities of those tools, the overlap and the ability to say, wait a minute, we've got 3 tools that do the same thing. Sometimes there may be reasons, there may be specific capabilities of those tools, but many times it's because one group got one tool, a second group got the second, a third one got the third. Nobody wants to give up and learn the tool of the other 2 groups. So helping to manage that complexity, and having the staff to be able and to get people trained in a timely fashion with the speed that business moves at right now, Norm, it's a real challenge. To come back to your original question of what are some of the challenges, it's finding the right people, it's training them in a timely fashion, and we've been investing. We've created a cyber academy, in fact, where we leverage SANS training and we leverage a lot of other training, including some custom built training internally, to make sure our 3,500 plus people in the United States are up to speed and ready for the challenges they're going to encounter on their next project.
Right. And let me add something to that complexity, and that is M&A. I mean, so many of your larger corporations now are acquiring other companies. These companies don't want to give up the tools that they have. In some cases, it could take a year, 2 years to really integrate all of their information, let's say, into the main corporation. So I think you have to deal with that as well. And, as we're talking about that, I see Jim Green has a question for us. He says, how do you deal with organizations that assume security operations expertise and translate that into governance, risk, and compliance? He said he has seen several talented SecOp people leave an organization because they're being forced to also perform GRC tasks. Interesting question. How would you respond?
I will give you the consulting answer to every possible question out there in the entire universe. It depends.
I knew you were going to say that.
So the 2 perspectives on it, and you have to get into the organization, where the question assumes we're looking at it from the employee perspective, which is fine and valid. And in that particular case, what were they hired to do? What are they being asked to do? And is it a fit for where they want to take their particular career at that point in time? And that's valid, and it may make sense for them to leave or move on to another opportunity where they're not doing things that help grow their career. And from that perspective, it's incumbent on management to look down and say, okay, what are the career paths for my people? What are those skills and capabilities they need to grow and learn? And how do I help them focus on those paths? And in this specific case, it's not focusing on GRC tasks. Now, the alternative view on that is looking at it from the management's perspective. At one point in time, they needed those operations people. Now they need GRC people. Again, I put it back on management to be honest and transparent with their employees and say, we know you were doing this. This is the skill set. Is this what you want to do?
Right. Well, I think too, when we put it on management, I think one of the problems that I've observed in some of the bigger Fortune 500 companies, let's say Fortune 20 as an example, is that they're so massive. Sometimes the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. And there doesn't seem to be a way in which you can merge that, or maybe more of a resistance, as a result of silos in organizations, which to me is death. I mean, if you're going to have silos, you're walking down, I think, an aisle that will cause you to die. because I don't think you can have it today because of the complexities that are involved and trying to make everything work. And the other thing, I'll let you answer that. Then we'll go into another question.
Sure. For that one, I will again. It depends. I'll take the contrary argument. I worked with one CEO a number of years ago at a communications company who said, I expect results from my business units and I don't expect excuses. And every time they come up to me with an excuse, I just take it out of the way. So they had a centralized IT organization. The business unit complained that, we don't have the IT support we need. They said, fine, carved up the IT organization. He gave the business unit management the direct control of IT. So they did exactly what they wanted. And, we don't have the supply chain support we need. Fine. Carved it out, put it in. So they siloed the entire organization and took away every excuse from that business management for not meeting their goals. And at the end of the day, business management either met their goals that were set for them by the organization, or they ended up being replaced, but they had no excuses left. So in that type of situation, Norm, I can see the value of creating a silo. And it's, there are challenges. You're creating duplicative IT organizations, and yes, you're creating duplicative cyber capabilities.
Right.
But in that case, the goal is the business. The goal is not, optimizing the infrastructure. Now, once you've done that, should that focus come back and make sure that there is consistency of IT across the organization and consistency of cyber across the organization? Absolutely, yes. But there are reasons to silo.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that. It brings up a story way back when I was at KPMG in around 2001. I was working on a project and we had to put in a LAN in Century City, a town I know you're quite familiar with, Los Angeles. And so I was getting pushback saying, oh, it's going to take 6 weeks to get this in. So I said, guys, gals, you got 3 weeks to do it. It has to get done. And if it doesn't get done, let's have a conversation with the managing director here in Montvale, New Jersey. It was miraculous. It got done. It just got done, right? So I think, too, in part to what you're saying, I think we tend, if we have a lot of work to do, we'll get it done within a specified period of time. If we have a little bit of work to get done, we'll still get it done within that specified period of time, which could be the same thing. So, it's I guess it's the old adage, give a busy person a task and they'll get it done. So I think that's part of it, too. But yeah, I mean, there should be no pushback on IT. To me, the biggest problem I have seen is that IT sometimes can be the voice of no. And to me, that's just death. To me, IT is the organization that supports the business. End of conversation, not negotiable. We don't say no. We find ways on how to make it work. And if we can't do that, then you need to quit and go into another business. That's how I see it.
Yeah, IT needs to be, and cyber needs to be, not the organization of NO, but the organization of KNOW.
Yes.
The answer has to be, yes, we can do it. And always a yes. And here's what the costs are.
Right.
Here's what the time frame is. And yes, we can spend a little more, make it go faster. But there are answers to everything. You've just got to figure out, is it worth it in the business context? But just saying, no, you can't do that, they will go around you every time.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, and I've seen it happen more often than once, as I'm sure you have. So I think, I have one question here. There's another question from Ernesto. He's saying, what are your thoughts on blockchain technology and how that can be used in cyber?
Norm, for this one, I have a request for you. I think this was only a 45-minute session.
Sure.
We'll need to expand it to 8 days.
Okay.
Just to answer that one question. There are, it's fascinating. And I think there are so many different capabilities. There was a really interesting presentation at the PCI Community Forum last week where, from my description of it, they were giving an example of using a blockchain for endpoint detection, which I think is a really innovative use case of it. So the ability to put out a trusted and community on a distributed ledger, a whitelist, if you will, or allow list, if you will, of approved applications, and then the deny list of unapproved or other malicious applications you can see out there. And I thought leveraging a blockchain for that type of endpoint security was really, really interesting. And there are tons of really unique applications, as well as, from a completely different perspective with tons of ransomware. And you look at kind of the four big trends. I think we were talking about this just before, looking at ransomware, using current affairs as bait, supply chains attack, and ongoing social engineering, all challenges we've seen. There are ways. The whole point of a distributed ledger is visibility. And so if ransomware is the biggest problem and you're paying it in Bitcoin through a blockchain, well, what tools are we using? In fact, there are some published reports of the FBI tracking payments, tracking ransomware payments through blockchain and being able to recover some of it if they can do it quickly enough. So there are so many different ways and areas of blockchain. I can go on with other examples, but those are just two ideas I've seen floating around recently.
Oh, that's cool. The another question up here that maybe we can both answer: how should the board of directors be involved in a risk management process at a growth stage of a startup? Where I guess ARR is the most critical metric.
Average rate of return, I'm going to assume.
That's what I'm going to assume, right?
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's one of their key roles. But again, let's define risk as what it is. That's overall risk management. And if Mario, if we're defining it the same way, I think that's one of the board's major tasks, is to understanding the risks to an organization meeting its goals and seeing how we manage those risks and seeing what risks we accept. And if you are in the startup phase, by definition, you're accepting more risk because you have to. You don't have the resources at that point. You don't have the maturity. You maybe don't have the skilled staff in all areas that you need. And if you do have the skilled staff, there is so much to do, they don't have the time. But fundamentally, the board should be looking at all the enterprise risks, right? Cyber being one of them, supply chain, financial, market, and prioritizing them and saying which ones can we address and which risks do we just have to accept.
Right. Let me just add to that too. So if anybody, that's in our audience that is going to be presenting to a board of directors and you're in cybersecurity, my recommendation is that you keep everything at a 12th grade level. Do not get involved in talking tech when you're presenting to a board. Clearly, there may be one person on the board that understands cybersecurity, and you can have a conversation with them. But for the most part, keep it simple, stupid. And by the way, be consistent. Every quarter, when you have to present to a board, you must be consistent in your presentations, because what you want to do is build confidence in what you are saying. You want them to believe you. And in order to do that, you have to be consistent in how you present. Agreed?
Not only agreed completely, and I'll build on that. And I spend a lot of time helping CISOs with their presentations to the board and crafting their decks and crafting their messages. And some of the big mistakes I see on a regular basis is trying to communicate too much.
Yes.
Figure out those top 3 messages and make it one message per slide. If you can't look at a slide and understand the point of what the CISO is trying to say within less than 10 seconds, you've made this way too complex. You have to be able to look at it. A graphic, a picture really helps to get a message across, but they should get it and understand, and realize the board doesn't need every level and every bit of detail on the slide. You can keep it to 20 words or less. Just keep it very clear. If they want to know more, they will ask you. If you've established the credibility and you've kept it simple and done the things that Norm said, they will dive in where they feel they need to dive in. They will move on where they don't feel they need to dive in. But keeping the slides very simple, keeping 3 main points, and keeping 1 point per slide with maybe a backup or 2, because cyber usually gets 5 to 10 minutes on a board, and those 5 or 10 minutes I've seen gone very well, and I've seen them go very, very badly. I've seen career limiting moves occur in what was supposed to be a 10-minute board meeting, and just the 10-minute meeting ends up going 20 because you've forced the board to ask a question multiple times because you haven't answered the question.
Right.
That's those are painful things to watch. But yeah, keeping it incredibly simple and direct and prioritizing what's most important, absolutely key in those communications.
Yeah, what I recommend too for people that are presenting is that if you're going to present, talk to a person that knows nothing. Talk to your wife, your spouse, whomever, about that, and explain to them. And if they can understand what it is you're talking about, you're a winner. If they don't, you got to go back to the drawing board and rethink it. That's really how I see all of that. The other thing I think that's important when you're presenting to a board is if you're asking for money, 100,000, a million, 2, 3, whatever the number is, you have to talk about it in terms of an investment that the board is going to make and not an expense. And I really think that's important from my perspective, because secure your organization.
Agreed.
So, good way to go, I think. Yep. So good. Let's move on here. I want to talk a little bit about applications. We kind of went over it a little bit, and seeing that you could have 3, 4, 5 of the same applications in an organization because of mergers and acquisitions, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on how you go about trying to consolidate those applications? Because clearly, if you have one enterprise application, it's going to cost you a heck of a lot less money than it would if you have 4 or 5. So what are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, two major directions on that. Number one, you have to come up with your philosophy. Where are you in your budget cycle? How much budget do you have? And are you going to do best of breed? Or if you don't have unlimited budget, are you going to look for a suite and leverage the capabilities? So when we do tools rationalization, we've got just a big, massive spreadsheet, and we've got all the NIST CSF capabilities down one side. And then we track all the different tools and suites and capabilities of those products across the NIST capabilities are the rows, the tools across the columns. And then you can just kind of look and see, okay, for recover specific capabilities, we have these tools that do these things. And then you can make a judgment call of, well, do I need the specific capabilities of this tool, this tool, this tool? Or does this one tool here that I leverage with my enterprise license do enough or good enough to give me that visibility that those 3 other tools that I have do? So it's work, and it's management, and it's politics, because the real question then becomes, is it that 20% of the capabilities that I really, really need? Or is it that I like the representative from the company, or I am comfortable with that, I don't want to change? I've got integrated. It's going to cost me something to make that change. Lots of different variables to consider, but doing a mapping against a framework to see what tools you have and see what capabilities you need. And we use NIST CSF, and I've used other ones. A lot of people are starting to use the CMMC.
Right.
Some people still use ISO 27000. So whichever framework you like. I'm not married to any one in particular, but it's doing the hard work of seeing what you have, comparing it to a framework, and seeing, are there any gaps? Because when you do that, you'll also find there are controls you may not have a tooling for, which is okay if you've got a process. That's fine. But make sure it's a conscious choice and not something that you missed by not looking comprehensively at it. And then B, if you do have tooling for it, do you have multiple tools, and do you need all of them, or can you consolidate? And it's not just saving money, right? And I've seen the ability to save millions and millions in tool consolidation and not lose anything from the control perspective. But it's also just simplifying. And I'll just end my answer with one example. Looking at asset management, understanding all the assets you have. If you have one asset management system that does a reasonably comprehensive job of identifying the assets and applications and servers and network components on your enterprise infrastructure, you have a pretty good set of visibility. If you have two and no way to get a single view across them, or three, and I've seen organizations with 4 different types of CMDB capabilities.
Yikes.
And limited ability, so they're creating more work, and it takes longer to address an incident, because the first thing the folks in the Security Operations Center need to do is go to 4 places and look for information. So that complexity is definitely an enemy of security, going back to the theme I said up front of one of the things that keeps me up at night is that level of complexity.
Got it. So let's move on to budgets. We talked about that a little earlier before the broadcast began. Are cybersecurity budgets up to snuff? How do they compare to overall budgets, and what are your thoughts?
From a budget perspective, in general, what I've seen after years of research, we've got a Digital Trust Insight survey, and we've been doing a version of that for decades. I helped build it back in 1997 here at PwC. And in general, you're going to find somewhere between 1 to 2% of the IT budget to 12% of the IT budget. And that's very industry specific. Manufacturing used to be around 1%. And in fact, we're starting to see those numbers double and triple with OT security. Telecommunications and media companies were somewhere between 4 to 5% of the IT budget. And financial services, especially because of the regulatory, we see somewhere between 8 and 12% of the IT budget. Now, that's a very broad number and a broad range, and that changes based on the organization, based on their level of maturity, based on the criticality of their information. Obviously, if it's a company that does a cybersecurity product, they spend a lot more on cybersecurity than the average.
Right.
So you've got to put the spend in context, but looking at it not just as a benchmark, because I think that's one way, and it starts to give you a sense if you're around your peers, above or below. But looking at it from a capabilities perspective, saying, what are the risks we have? Going back to the risk management question. And are we addressing those risks effectively? And then saying, okay, do we have the services we need? Do we have the controls to address those risks? And then we do have a service catalog of capabilities that help us implement and manage and maintain those controls. So kind of doing that mapping and looking at it comprehensively. So 1, benchmark yourself against others. 2, really look at it from the risk perspective and say, build our budget up based on our risks, not based on what we see others doing.
Cool. Thank you for that. I think, the other thing that comes to mind. I know you're a little bit of an expert. I'm being somewhat facetious by saying that. And that is third-party vendor risk management. I know.
Yeah, I am familiar, but I would say, yeah, we have my partner Dean Spitzer and Garrett Gemmenhart and Dennis Frio live and breathe that every day. They're
I know
people
they do.
I go to,
Yeah, I
and
know.
people like you, Norm, who have live and breathe third-party risk management every day.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things, I mean, we could probably talk about TPRM for, hey, you got a week, let's have a conversation. We can do a course on it. But I think one of the areas that I think is really important, I just wanted to get your opinion, is if we're going to manage our vendors, I personally believe that continuous monitoring plays an important role in the oversight of our vendors. Clearly, when we do a review, they're really either a point in time or a period of time, whether it's a SOC 2 or whatever. So what are your thoughts on continuous monitoring?
Given this world of supply chain attacks, and I think I touched on that, number 3 of my 4 trends, dealing with those third parties, fourth parties, and fifth parties, which we're seeing all those things, is just becoming absolutely critical. And we're seeing that by the demand out in the marketplace for resources to be able to manage and monitor it real time. I think it's got to be ongoing. I think it's a game we in the cyber industry can continue to raise the bar. And, there are tools, there are products, and there are services out there that help you continue to monitor. So I think, Norm, you're right. And it's a combination of all those things. What are you doing from your own program?
Right.
What products are you leveraging out in the marketplace to add to the information you have about your third, fourth, fifth parties and so on? And then what services are available to help you monitor and do it in a cost-effective way? Because it used to be, I go back 10 plus years ago, we've got thousands of vendors. We'll review the top 5%, maybe more than 10 years ago at this point. But then it matured over time to say, well, we've got thousands of vendors. We're going to look not just at the top 10%, but we're going to look at our riskiest ones. And now it's starting to look at saying, we can't just look at our top 10%. We can't just look at the riskiest ones. We have to look at the universe, but we've got to do it in an effective and cost-effective manner. So I've kind of seen the shift of TPRM to become more and more comprehensive and more of a challenge because of that.
So it's no longer the concept of tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. It's really looking at the universe of vendors and working your way through it. Because I would suspect that maybe that vendor that intellectually maybe doesn't pose or a threat really could be the one that gets that phishing email, that gets somebody, like I say, you can't stop stupid. You can try. We all try. We send out, I'm sure your firm sends out emails to all the employees, phishing attacks to make sure, and educate them. But, I think, it could be that unknown vendor that somehow has connectivity that gets hooked.
Yeah, and Norm, to be clear, I think we're saying, when I'm saying the entire universe, that can be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. To your point of how do you effectively look and manage that entire universe of third-party vendors?
Yeah, how do you? I mean, it's difficult. I think those are part of the challenges.
Yep.
Let me throw a left hook in here. I'm going to get a little tangential on you right now. But when I talk to people and I say, do you know how long it takes to decrypt AES 128-bit encryption? And maybe a year. And I'll say, no, it's a little bit over 10 billion years to decrypt that. And once you're in the 256, it's off the charts. You're talking trillions of years. But when you start looking at quantum computing, now that same 128 is going to take between 6 and 8 months to decrypt using quantum computers. So my question to you is, where do we go? I mean, clearly it's not only about encryption, but when I think about quantum computing and I think about nation states, behind that as it becomes more available, to me, it becomes a very scary and concerning proposition. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's, cybersecurity is a game of chess with no kings. We just have to keep playing. And specifically to your question, if we don't have, you know, if the challenge is quantum computing, the answer has to be quantum cryptography. And in fact, one of the things I've seen standards bodies doing and trying to address in new standards going forwards is the ability to change out cryptography algorithms, be them traditional or quantum, to address the new types of computing challenges and the new levels of computing capabilities that will be coming. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Yes, it is.
If it gives you a new challenge, it also gives you a new answer.
Right. New job keeps you employed. That's for sure.
Definitely.
Because, we have another question here from.
And actually, there's a good one here from Hala. If I can.
Yes, I was going to go ahead.
Oh,
please, take it. No, go for it.
Yeah. Question is: some board members require details, and others don't want to see the details. How do you manage that? That is a great question, and that's one I see CISOs trip over on a regular basis. And how you manage it is putting those 3 main points in your slides in the main part of the deck, and then I've seen 40-page appendices. So if the detail's there, put it into the appendices. For most boards, you have to submit the board presentation that's going to be discussed 1 to 2 weeks in advance at a minimum. And the board directors will read those presentations. If they want to, they will read the appendix slide and then potentially ask you questions on the appendix slide. In 80% of the cases, I've seen the board members do their homework before. So if they want the top level message, it goes into those top 3 slides, or whatever the specific context is of the board. If it's the audit committee, if they're doing a special deep dive on cyber, obviously you're going to have more slides, but put the details to the appendix. Leave the complexity for those who want to go look at the appendix, and keep the clear messages up in the deck. Because if you try to put all the details in the deck, you will lose those who don't need it, and
Right.
you're off the rails before you start.
Right. And you might as well polish up your resume at that point.
Maybe.
In some cases, not all cases, but some.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I think Hala also has another question. What tools are available that can help in monitoring third-party security controls? Clearly, I can think of 9 or 10 right now, but I would recommend that you go out onto the internet, do a search for them, and really try and interview as many as you can to get an understanding of what each one does. Because what you really want to do is find out what application, what company best fits your requirements. I would take that approach, because you don't need to boil the ocean if you're a small organization. If you're a large organization where you have 10,000 vendors, different conversation. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I think we said we're up to 45 minutes. We're doing well. I'm wondering, is there any other questions from anybody that we have here? I'm not finding that many. We got blockchain and so forth. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share, Mark?
I think as we wind down, I kind of come back to that theme of complexity. Security is simplicity, and simplicity is security. The more you can take the complexity out of it, keep a baseline of, core security controls and focus on them. And there will be a lot of them, but if you have to do each control 2 or 3 times, you're just making it harder on yourself. So the more you can simplify, and there's lots of ways to go about that, the more secure, the better the chance you have of being able to secure your environments.
Got it. Well, thank you. Hey, this is fun. I appreciate you coming on the show. And obviously, we'll stay in touch. And I think that's
My
it for
pleasure.
now. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.